time we were at CTTB, there was a teaching assistant who would go in early, and this was in No Words Hall usually, which is now where Shifu Sharira are, and Shila Sharira, would go in early and write the passage on the board. And then when we came in, that person was in charge of having us speak in 2 languages. We were supposed to speak in the language we didn't know as well first, and then follow with the language we knew well. And that person who was the teaching assistant would make sure we all said our thing. Our part as people coming in is we knew ahead of time what the passage was, and we were supposed to memorize it. So that when we came in and we gave our talk, we didn't have to turn around and look at the board and what the passage said. We just knew it by heart. So one morning I got a call from my family. I was not close to my family after I became a nun, but one of them called me to tell me my father had had a major heart attack. So by that time, Shifu had younger people, younger monastics attending on him. And so whereas before I could just go and knock on the door of Kay and he would let me in, now you had to go through a young nun and get permission. I told her I would like to see Shifu. It was an emergency. My father had had a heart attack. And the morning passed. She didn't find me. So I went to the JGH Buddha Hall. And I was saying Guanyin's name. And I was surprised that I was so moved by my father's heart attack, because I'd only seen my family once, and it didn't go well. And I didn't have contact with him. I didn't write him letters or things like that. So I was very surprised at the depth of the emotion that came up with the idea that my father was dying. So I was into that depth of emotion and saying Guanyin's name silently. And Shifu sent one of the nuns to find me. And her message from Shifu was, "What are you doing? You're not going to eat? You want to die with your father?" So he always pushed me like that. You know, you ask about compassion, and he used 2 kinds. One was to gather people in, and so he was soft with some people. And then the other one was to admonish, and he was hard with people. And I was a person he was almost always hard with, because I'm a very stubborn person. So that kind of talk from him, you know, I would react to. So I thought, okay, for you, I'm gonna go to the class today, which was after lunch. And it was Nirvana Sutra, of all things. And there was a passage you had to memorize. So I memorized the passage and got ready so that I'd be able to present if needed. And I went. And we had Christian church pews back then. The pews were up. And so I was sitting on a pew, and the master came in early. Usually he didn't come in until the end after we've all given our talks. He came in early, and of course the nun had never gotten back to me, so I hadn't been able to talk to Shifu. So he walked up, and he's standing here, and I'm here, and he says, Guichil, recite Amitabha's name. And I nodded my head, but I was so full of emotion that when I got my head down, I couldn't bring it back up. I was stuck down there. And so he waited there, and I'm thinking, if I recite Amitabha, Amitabha is for when people die. And I'm reciting Guanyin because I don't want my father to die. I'm thinking that. And he says, or you could recite Guanyin. And I did, and my father lived to within a month of Shifu's passing. So I was always clear. My father had a terrible heart attack, and then the blood flowed around his heart and kept him alive instead of through the proper channels, you know. So it was a very precarious life, but he had life. And about a month before Shifu passed, my father passed, and I understood what that meant. Shifu had to let go of probably lots and lots of people he was keeping alive at that time. So I call it a lifesaver too.
It's like when my mother died. Shifu helped her a lot, even though he barely knew her, or at least, you know, she barely knew him, I should say. But she got cancer, and the master called her before she even knew that she was terminally ill. He called her a couple of weeks on the phone, and they'd only met once or twice. And he called her on the phone, and he had Heng Guan do the translation. And he talked to her for about a half hour, 45 minutes on the phone. And a week later, my mother says, you know, your teacher, Shifu, he called me. She was amazed that he was so kind. He said, told me not to worry, everything's going to be okay. And on, he was so gentle and kind. I said, really, Shifu? He said, yeah, because you never talked to him. I mean, she's only met him once or twice in a very short time. And yeah, he was so, and he went on, and Heng Guan, he translated for him, and they talked to me for a long time. She was just amazed. He goes, she was so kind, she kept saying. And then she found out a week or two later that she was terminally ill. And she didn't live much longer after that, you know. And then when she passed away, she used to come in my dream. I'd have a dream once a month. She would come to me in a dream. And we'd go out to a restaurant together. She'd buy me lunch in my dream. And she'd tell me everything's okay. The master came to me when I died, and he really helped me. So, and then she said, I really very happy, and she was very grateful to him. She says, I'm not in the heavens and I'm not in the hells. She says, everything's okay. I feel really good. It's like he's really helping me a lot. Then we do that like once a month. She'd take me out to another restaurant, and we'd have lunch together and see how things are. Then after a few months, she stopped, no more. Then I went to Shifu and told her that I had these dreams, and Shifu says, yeah, she went off to rebirth. I learned one thing though, that he used to tell me this, that he only cares about making people Buddhas, waking them up to their Buddha nature. He didn't care about anything else, nothing. He's not attached to anything. He didn't care what it is. He'd only use it for expedience to wake people up. He didn't care who they were. He didn't care if you're a monk or a nun, a monk, layman, laywomen, dog or cat. He wanted to wake all living beings up. He just focused on making, he says, there's only one reason I'm on the earth is to make Buddhas. I'm only here to make Buddhas. I have no other interest. He says, this is like a big toilet bowl for me. He says, I'm just interested in everybody waking up to their Buddha nature.
I 希望把你们每一个人的罪业都消除去了，甚至于不能消除啊，把你们的罪业都布施给我，我要这个罪业，等我这个罪业堆得像须弥山那么高，你们的罪业都消得像那个平地一样。
所以啊，我才发这个一个很笨的愿力，说是啊，所有跟我出家的弟子和在家的皈依弟子，他们如果没有成佛的话，我也不成佛。那么皈依我的人，他们做蚂蚁，我也跟着做蚂蚁；他们做蚊虫，我也跟着去做蚊虫去；他们堕地狱，我也跟着堕地狱去；他们变恶鬼，我也跟着做恶鬼。哪一个做畜生了， 我也愿意陪着他去做畜生。那么发这么一个愿力，必须要他们都成佛了之后，然后我要愿意成佛我就成，我要不愿意成佛呢，我还不成。说你为什么不愿意成佛呢？因为我看见还有很多人没有成佛呢，我还要去拖他们一把。所以就是我的皈依弟子和出家弟子在家弟子都成佛了以后我还要看看情形再说。那么这是我今天呢想对你们说的话。所以我说我发这个愿呢是很笨的，不过我这个笨人就有个笨法子，就愿意这么笨。